So for the next panel discussion, from DEI pitfalls to milestones, advancing inclusion through effective problem solving. To do this, I would like to introduce our moderator, Ms. Sonica Aron, CEO Marching Sheep, and the panelist, Ms. Bhavna Batra, VP People and SNP Global, Karishma Manchanda, Inclusion, Diversity and Impact, CSR and Sustainability India Geo Lead Expedia Group, Rubi Khan, Head Culture Learning, Talent and DEI Luminous Power Technologies, Leenika Khattar, Director of Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging Chartered, Nasscom, Renu Bohra, CHRO National Engineering Industries Limited, that is NBC Bearing, Akshay Tyagi, Head Diversity, Inclusion and Equity, the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group, and Kamaljeet Kaur, Chief People Officer, Gensol Group. Can we have a huge round of applause for all of them?
On it? Okay. All right. Okay. So good morning again, everyone. So we have an interesting panel discussion. We have two more panelists who would join us shortly, but we would get started in the meantime. If you recall, I had spoken when I had started the event that there has been a journey so far. There are a lot of things that different organizations are doing. Inclusion is a journey. Having said that, there are certain challenges that we all face, and these challenges can range from saying that how do I even get started? How do I align my leadership? What are the kind of initiatives that will make a difference? Sometimes we are even asked, what is the ROI? If we look at, sometimes when we speak to our clients, while in the demographics within the country, where is it that our employees come from? Our employees come from the society which is as diverse as it can get, right? So we have everybody represented there. We have women, we have people from the LGBTQ community, we have people with disabilities. As of today, the percentage of zillennials and millennials in the workforce has crossed 60%, and it is supposed to reach 72%, if I am not wrong, by 2025, right? So it is increasing, it is evolving, their requirements are evolving. The question that we need to ask, and that is why this panel, and here we have people who have done some great work in their respective organizations, is that what is the range of challenges that we face? That is number one. How do we build our strategies on overcoming those challenges, and once we have arrived at those strategies, how do we bring them to life? So these are the three sections that we are going to try and cover in the next 40 odd minutes, right? So let me start, everyone. My first question, and this question is to you, Bhavna. As an organization, what are some of the common challenges that we come across as DEI professionals or CHROs when we try and drive the DEI agenda?
Yeah. Thanks, Sonica. Pleasure to be here this morning. So I think the biggest challenge is we've made what is actually a deep conversation all about metrics. That's the biggest challenge, right? I'm a huge believer of the fact that what gets measured is what gets delivered, but the way you measure things tells a story of its own. And I think today one of the challenges that we face is everything is about percentage of representation. The conversation on inclusion, and thank you so much for setting a beautiful tone for this particular discussion, because it's all about mindset and it's all about intent. And unfortunately, when you make everything about metrics, mindset and intent leads to diffused accountability. right? Because it's then about, I want to appear to be doing this, I want to appear to be doing that, and it's all about how do I measure that impact, right? And I believe that, being able to focus on really what is it that we're trying to make happen. Sometimes that conversation gets lost in the conversation around how do we measure the impact of what we're going to try and make happen, right? I think the other big aspect is that as we work in virtual hybrid contexts, we are also figuring it out. We don't have all of the answers. So in the organization, and while the views that I'm sharing are my personal views, I do want to dip into a couple of organizational examples as well. I think in the organization that I work with, for instance, we are now starting to work with colleagues with neurodiversity, because we genuinely want to create that kind of an inclusive environment where everybody is welcome and everybody feels like, they belong. But it's not easy, because we are a manifestation of our society. At the end of the day, organizations are nothing but a reflection of the societal context that we operate in. And in our societal context also, true inclusion is a bit of a question mark, right? So if I were to just to bring it together and summarize, I think two big things sometimes come in the way, Sonica. One, the fact that everything is about metrics and everything is about projecting outcomes. So the projection becomes more important than truly what it is. And two, how do we bring intent and translate that into not just big stuff, but the small stuff, right? The day-to-day things. Because it is in the small day-to-day that we are actually able to make that difference. And I'm not so sure that we do that all too often.
Right. Thank you so much, Bhavna. And when you say that, intent and translate it into action, very often we are met with resistance as well, right? Because like you said, that our organizations are a reflection of society. And Karishma, let me ask you here that, and everyone please feel free to pitch in, because I'm sure that we have all dealt with resistance. Why is there still resistance? Because everyone, like Arushi said, nobody wants to be seen being exclusionary. And no, I also believe that no one is deliberately discriminatory or exclusionary. And yet when we want to drive the DEI agenda, we face resistance.
Thanks for the question. I think some of the points are not something which is new to us. Initially, when we have been trying to step into the corporate world, and I'm talking about, soon after the independence, when we started organizing ourselves, a lot of these questions came up then as well. And the question always remained about the culture. Today, we see culture as something which is given, and we now are moving away from just talking about culture, but how do you build a culture of inclusivity, of belonging, and of equity. And diversity is something that you cannot really be without now. Now, having said that, I think a lot of resistance comes because, number one, we do not ourselves know that what is the destination we are trying to chase. DEI is never a destination, it's a journey for each one of us to travel, right? So when I do not really know what is the end product, and I'm sorry to say this, but yes, many of our leaders, irrespective of the background they're coming from, or whatever the good intent they bring to the table, we all are wired to be very masculine when we're talking about numbers and tracking digits and showing up progress. Even things like innovation has been linked with diversity and inclusion, but how far and how many of us can stand by it and say, because I have a diverse workforce, therefore I have X% of innovation coming up, or X number of innovation coming up in my product line. It is not a direct correlation that comes up. And because it is so feminine in nature, it is not directly attributed towards, because I did A, so B is the result. that is why the leadership sometimes fail to also see DEI as a part which is inherent in the business strategy. We do not really see the bigger picture coming up which is in line with DEI. Always DEI is considered to be a good to have kind of a thing rather than a must have kind of a thing, right? And that also stems from a lot of factors around it. For example, if I talk about leaders who are actually accountable and if they walk the talk, the culture starts to build around DEI. Many of leaders who have not been traditionally ingrained into the I&D concept, there is a fear of loss of power, there is a fear of loss of privilege. Because the moment that we step into all of the I&D related agendas, if you talk about, equity comes into the picture. Right? And traditionally, we have all seen that as a nation, in India itself, with diverse cultures, diverse religions, and within the religion, sub-religions, castes, and so on and so forth, the power distance itself has been huge. On the top of that, we have been colonized by the British, and we know the kind of power distance that came up then.
Yeah.
We are still not away. We're 75 plus years into independence, but we still very strongly believe in that power distance. And so much so that organizations which are typically Indian origin, right? Those are the organizations that are really looking forward to challenging their own mindsets when we're talking about moving ahead.
Yeah. So, Karishma, sorry. Yeah, please.
You know, I just wanted to add one other dimension, and this is specifically when we look at generations in the workforce. Here's an interesting dichotomy. The majority of decision makers, not all, but the majority of decision makers are baby boomers and Gen X. Whereas the majority of people who actually translate supposed strategy into reality and get stuff done is millennials and Gen Z. Now, the context of each generation, and while you cannot generalize generations because there's a difference between urban and rural exposure, there's a difference from a cultural perspective, etc. But if for a moment we just take the broad generalization of generations, the perspective is very different.
Very different.
So
yeah.
today, what do you have? Today you have a conversation that is happening about Gen Z being really entitled. You have a conversation that is happening about the pace of decisions taken by baby boomers and Gen X being really slow and us needing more agility, right? So I think somewhere to the question that you asked, somewhere what is coming in the way, it is fear of change.
Fear of change. So, I just want one clarification, Renu, before. Karishma, you mentioned masculine and feminine, and for the benefit of the audience, if you could give those definitions, because it doesn't, speak to the sex of the person. These are leadership styles or these are ways of behaving. So if you could just clarify that, and then we'll take Renu's inputs.
Sure. So it all starts with the way that we're being wired. You know, we always say that the way women think about is very different than the way a man looks about. And when we talk about masculinity, it's more about driving that change into tangible aspects, whereas femininity is more about those inherent predeterminants that come before the change really starts to show results. For example, if I talk about the elements of femininity in a culture, it's all about how inclusive you are. But when you talk about the dimension of masculinity, you will talk about numbers in terms of what is the URI representation. For example, how many PWDs are represented, how many persons with I would say like, LGBTQIA plus spectrum are represented in a leadership team. What is the role that is given to a woman in who is sitting on the board of directors? Is that more feminine or masculine? Again, the question comes back to you. What are the numbers are you trying to change? The moment that you give numbers, it becomes a very masculine component. Whereas DEI, as I mentioned earlier, is a very feminine component. It is more which is going into the system and not out the system, which means it is the impetus that you're building into the culture. What comes out, which is more tangible and measurable, is more about the masculine factors that you see, feel, experience, chase numbers, make progress, and more importantly, show to the world around.
Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, Renu.
Thank you. First of all, good morning to you all. And I think we are seeing maybe a change in a conference template that we have a mix of men and women. So I'm so happy, and we have a good gathering here. So I think that whatever we start with today can be a dialogue as the day progresses. To your question, Sonica, that what are the challenges that we have in the DEIB, and obviously I think it's the most important question that first look at the challenges, and they will be different for different organizations, different industry. And I come from organization which are into manufacturing setup, which are into logistics and warehousing kind of setup, and I've seen 3 or 4 key challenges. One is that a feeling among leaders that they know all. And all policies generally are top driven. So if your leader thinks that he or she knows all, then what happens? Then their experience guides the entire narrative in the organization. And I've seen that. We had a couple of CEOs I've seen in my organization where whenever I would go and say that in our industry we have only 9% diversity in terms of gender and 12% and so on, how do we enhance? So he said, no, my all hiring managers are very unbiased. They are like, they have come from great B schools, and they're above discrimination. So if a woman candidate is suitable, or if she is deserving, she'll get into the system, as if it is such an easy thing. And when we go into those hiring manager discussion, we find that they're talking about this, when are you going to get married? The same questions. Yeah, so what are your plans for having children? So that again is the myth being carried in the head of the leader. Second thing I found is that the tendency of we know all. So we had this great CEO, and whenever I said that our next generation of the business leaders, there's no women, he said, in my school days or in my college days, there were hardly any women in mechanical engineering batch. So how will they come? As if, he knows all, and mechanical engineer being qualification is the best thing in the world. You can always try a leader who is not an engineer in your engineering organization. And then I think one challenge is chicken and egg, what will come first? So if we don't have ramps in the organization, we will never hire somebody with PWD. Or if we don't have sensitization done, we can't hire transgender. So what will come first? And then you are always in that, vicious circle that we are not prepared, so let's not hire. Yeah, so this is what I've seen.
Right. Yeah, Kamal.
I think, good morning. Thanks, Sonica, and everybody talked about corporate. I'm going to touch a very different, kind of domain here. I think what doesn't come naturally, there's a resistance. So imagine all of us are probably, of course, not the Gen Zs now, and probably on the top. And we have our CEOs, CXOs. And look at what has happened to them when they were studying, and their society, and where did this whole DI came in when they were studying or when they were being groomed, right? So I feel that none of them, including us, were prepared for such a step, right? And it's not natural. So something which is not natural, there'll always be a resistance. So what's happening now, and we, of course, we'll talk more about what are the corporate challenges. But what's happening now, and this is my request, you're a change agent, a lot of people, inclusion is a mindset. I think my 13-year-old son can talk much more better here than me. And the reason why it is because they've been exposed to much more inclusive habits than we were, right? True. So as they grow up, I think while we'll be talking, there's, it's not a movement, but this is a topic I thought I'll touch, that while they are growing, I think maybe 20 years hence, the Gen Zs or the Alphas would be talking very differently. They'll be talking what's happening or what they could do, and they probably they won't even be talking about this. True. Because it will be so natural to them. So the point I'm trying to say, Sonica, that many of the organizations, the growing organization, the intent is there, but first it doesn't come naturally, so there is resistance. And second, when the intent is there, it's not natural, there is an effort. And when there is an effort, that's the point where, you know, in a fast growing pace, you know, how much effort you want to put in, how much are the leaders in sync of it, I think that determines the success of DI. So I will pause here. Of course, there are many questions, but the root thing which I want to say today is that while we are focusing on corporates, but maybe 20 years hence, you know, we should also focus on lot of these younger generations to get them exposed.
Yeah.
So from a society perspective, this is how this change would come. But we talk more on the practices that we are doing, how corporates are, you know, gaining over this momentum, and just not making it, you know, look a fancy term, but really driving DI. I think that's the intent.
Yeah.
What she was saying, another piece that I've found, and I think each one of us here can vouch for that, is also a fear of making mistakes. As DI itself is a space which is evolving, sometimes we fear that if we support a particular identity, will that be considered as a positive discrimination, or will that be eventually leading to discrimination in itself? Because positive discrimination, yes, can support some silos, but effect of that particular discrimination still remains discriminatory towards the other. So what is the right way of doing that? Can I go all about and say, okay, I'm hiring only for PWDs, or I'm hiring only for LGBTQIA? Will that be something which my brand as an organization take a hit, or will that be supportive in the competitive industry that we all are? So a lot of these things that we are also treading, because last, I think, 10 to 12 years, there has been huge change fatigue in the industry itself.
Yes.
There have been laws after laws, legalities after legalities, change, CSR, prevention of sexual harassment, maternity benefits, all of that has been changing so fast paced. And there are very few people who have actually gained good certifications internationally to really understand what it really means to us.
So, you know, in the same space, right, while there have been places where there have been very enabling legislations, at the same time, there has been some reverse activism as well, where DEI efforts are also being questioned. They are being questioned, saying that, are they creating a tacit divide? Are they burying meritocracy? One question was, I think, asked, Rubi is not here yet, but somebody asked her the question that, Madam, were organizations not productive and profitable before DEI came into practice? So, I think, and it is open who would like to address this, because one thing which is also happening is that because there are legislations and pushback and activism around it, a lot of organizations are also talking about diffusing ownership and saying let line managers drive it or integrate it into other HR functions.
Yeah. So, about 3 years ago, I was at a business school and I was having a conversation with students, and there was a young gentleman who raised his hand and he says, I really want to understand from you, is it my fault that I'm male? I don't come from a reserved background. Is it my fault that there is no quota that I fit into? Don't I have a right to a job just like anybody else? So this was a very interesting conversation, and it really got me thinking, right? Because we have been talking about providing opportunities, and by the way, I still believe that there is a lot that we have to do to provide opportunities for everybody. But in one sense, are we swinging the pendulum from one side to the other side? It's a point of reflection. And that reflection is different for different contexts, it's different for different organizations, but it is a point of reflection, right? I think the other one, to the question that you asked, Sonica, several organizations have gone on record saying that they are rolling back, they're not going to have DEI teams, for instance, right? In several countries, like for instance, in the United States of America now, there is a rise in challenger legislation where people feel discrimination because of implementation of a number of DEI practices, etc. I think the question for us to really ask ourselves is, what is the intent? And how are you going after that intent, right? if the intent is to create an ecosystem where you are fostering true inclusion and belonging, then you also have to be mindful of the fact that for the opportunities of one set of people, you don't do away with opportunities for others. But I do believe that we are not at the stage of maturity where you can take away accountability from a certain group of people to be conscience keepers of that accountability. Right? When I think of DEI teams in organizations, I think of DEI teams as conscience keepers, frankly, right? Because we can't have only DEI teams that drive results independently. You leverage the network, you leverage the ecosystem to make that happen. And where those conscience keepers go away, I feel accountability will get diffused, and that's a watch point for us to just be mindful of.
And here there are so many different industries, right? And many times when I speak to, let's say, people from traditional, and Renu and Kamal, you would possibly relate to this, infrastructure में नहीं हो सकता, projects में नहीं हो सकता, real estate में नहीं हो सकता, and I'm sure that here there would be people from different industries who would be struggling, saying that how do we drive it? अरे वो तो कॉल सेंटर है, KPO है, कंसल्टिंग है, इट इज़ पॉसिबल ओवर देयर, IT में इट इज़ पॉसिबल, राइट? सो and I believe that now today the workforce is fairly industry mobile and across functions. Yesterday I was doing a session in an Alcobev organization, and earlier there used to be a barrier saying that okay, we only want people from Alcobev, but now it is no longer the case. So do we still feel that there are industries where DEI cannot be driven, where we cannot have people from different dimensions?
Okay.
So,
Yeah. So I would actually like to start with some of the stories, because that people will relate to, and that is where the question was, because if it really exists. 7 years back, one person randomly called us asking for a job opportunity. Somebody who was only 10th pass and was still looking out for an opportunity because there was nobody in the family, and had a young child, a son, a brother to raise, because the parents divorced and then no parent took the responsibility. So this 18-year-old person finally took the battle that I will lead the family, reached out to us that I'm looking for a job. 7 organizations before us, they have reached out, and everybody rejected, saying that your resume that you had sent us is not aligning with the voice that you're calling us with, because the CV was of a girl, because they did not transition then, and the voice was a little harsher, because that's how we generally assign that, okay, it could be a male, it could be a female. And that was the reason for them not getting an opportunity for so long. What is also very dicey and very conflicting here is that we are judging people way before even looking at them and meeting them. They reached out to us and had no formal degree, like I said, only 10th pass, just 18.5-year-old. And we were also like, how do we start it? And we started with training program. They joined us. And I'm very proud and happy to share with all of you today that 7 years down the line, this person is Senior Executive Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, is probably part of every possible national daily newspaper that you count on, and has been part of that, sharing not just his personal story, but how he has impacted lives of so many others. I'd also like to share one more story. There was this individual who has worked with us at the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group in 2009 till 2013 as our cluster head of sales. Just imagine, 10 years down the line, they came back to us again, saying the kind of love, warmth, and family I have found here. This could be the only organization who could accept, and not just accept, but appreciate and celebrate me as who I am truly. 50 years, transitioned just very recently, 2 years back, and is the first ever general manager of our hotel. So these are the stories that we need to really now look for. This is what your diversity, equity, and inclusion commitment gives you. There is this person who worked in the Indian Navy some 10 years back, is 37 years old now, For 5 years, they were looking out for opportunity because we all know the state of all these Navy and Army and state, especially when you come out as gay and then affirm to your gender identity and tries to start transition. For 6 months continuously, they had no room to actually be at. And it was so depressing because they were in Mumbai with no opportunity to go to any place. They reached out to us at 1 a.m. in the midnight because somebody tried to rape them. And these are the trigger warnings that we constantly give to people, that these are all the possibilities. You would be surprised at 9 a.m. in the morning. That was the first interview my team in Mumbai conducted. The next day was the first day at the job, and 2 years down the line, today, they are the assistant revenue manager in our Delhi hotel. And these are the stories wherein these people have claimed these opportunities not because they are trans, not because they are somebody with disability, not because they are acid attack warriors, but because they are contributing equal, if not more, to anybody else in the system. I can accept that, okay, a lot of us talk about entry-level jobs for a lot of DEI hires, but here I am talking about people who have grown above being a trainee in our organization and have been assistant managers, executives, managers, DEI heads, and also the general managers of our hotel. I'm very proud and elated to share that being the largest employer of transgender persons in this country, with having over 200 transgender persons working in the system, I'm equal and more proud to also share that DEI, when it comes to the commitment, is not just limited to certain closeted individuals or not closeted individuals. It goes to everybody. All of us are on our individual journeys, and all of us have our temporary disabilities. All of us have our situations wherein mental health takes a toll on us. And these all are indicators which become more evident and visible when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is why us being on diversity chairs in our organizations is important, that people find themselves reflected and represented, and more than just being part of conversations, seen through in the culture of the larger organization. And that is where the commitment actually resides.
Awesome. So Akshay comes from hospitality industry, and there one could have challenges saying that guests aate hain and guests might not accept, and that is a place where they have overcome it, right? But how about infrastructure? How about yours and Ruby, in your industry? Are there these industry barriers?
I'll share some examples. So for the audience, I think I belong to a sector which is a leading renewable energy sector, and Blue Smart is one of our entities. And this whole initiative of DI actually started, and I'll speak more on the gender diversity part now, because it all started that we are deploying about 10,000 gig workers who are our driver partners behind the wheel. And when there were 5,000 or 6,000 number, I think we realized that we didn't have a single women driver behind the wheels. And that's where the whole point was, that one, from a business perspective, we needed more skilled people, more people who could actually be our partners. And we realized that is there a section of society that is completely underrepresented? And do we have a door to open for a completely new segment? And then when we actually went out to find out that, you know, if we could have more women representation, these were revelations which are still there. You know, driving a car is still considered to be a very, very male-dominated kind of work. And then a lot of going to the communities and explaining that how, you know, as a company, we would be kind of helping them to be more independent, and to your point, giving them the entire ecosystem of how they're going to be safe, their facilities, etc. So there's a lot that goes behind, right? And there's a set of concerted efforts that you have to make for those women driver partners to succeed. And let me tell you, we started with 1, 2, 3. We faced a lot of hardships. there was change. Our male counterparts, our people at the hubs had to be be more sensitive. We were also struggling. Like imagine a scenario when they're on the roads all the way through. How do they go to the washrooms? So all sort of infrastructure was created, Sonica. It's not easy, but there was an intent, and there was a business case. We launched this project Sakhi. I'm very proud that we have 100+ women and continuously trying to get that infrastructure in place. Today, many of our women drivers, most of them partners, get a 4.8+ rating. Customers love them. So I'm saying that we actually opened that, and there were a lot of stereotypes which I think the industry broke.
Yeah.
Those are examples that will actually, and many of the industries have given those. Manufacturing now is an example where it is, we are aiming, as our production starts for our EV vehicle, we are aiming to have an all-women line. So all these are initiatives or examples that really demonstrate that, hey, there is a person equally behind the wheels who could do that. And once we put that, and I'm would love to connect, we want to go more towards the other inclusions. And just to share, we are doing some sort of feasibility analysis of our hubs, that if we were to add more inclusive workforce, how would we be doing, whether our hubs are physically, they are able to access the hubs physically. So those are the kind of things we are now doing to make sure that it happens for us.
So what I hear you say is that, everybody spoke about intent and saying that how do you make it happen, right? And that is what I heard you, Kamal, say as well, right? How do I make it happen? In fact, we are working with a mining company, and in a mining company, how do you have women? And if a mining company can take that decision, then I'm sure other companies can as well.
Great advertisement by that company also.
Yes.
I mean, it's a matter of pride, and I worked for that company, so that's a great initiative which you are doing, and I agree with you how difficult it is. Similar things we are driving now at the project sites, and we've there seems to be a concerted efforts. You
Yes.
need those efforts to happen, but if you want to do it, then how do you do that is the question.
So, Ruby, let me come to you, and you can take the mic. You have done some work, breaking the broken rung, getting neurodiversity, and these are normally places where people struggle, organizations struggle. So would you like to share with the audience some practical tips, examples, stories that they can take inspiration from?
Sure, thank you. This is like putting someone into the spot and pressure, but thank you so much for that. My name is Ruby. I represent Luminous, which is a part of Schneider Group. I'm sorry, I go back to research because I took 7 years to complete my doctorate. But I would like to cite a very interesting research article by HBR 2022, which says that every organization goes through a phase of DEI. The first phase is aware, the second is compliant, the third is tactical, the fourth is integrated, and fifth is sustainable. What I've realized as a DEI practitioner for a while is that, one, I need to know where my organization stands and where I want them to go, because it's a journey, that's one. Second, I feel we should not forget that inclusion and equity has to be a bedrock for everything that we do. The reason, we can't do it men versus women, and I'm sorry, it's a little activism, but that's how it is coming up. In the US recently, like day before yesterday, Walmart pulled off their entire DEI agenda. So inclusion and equity has to be the bedrock, that's one. Second, I think the moment CEO and CXO in business starts taking sponsorship of DEI, DEI becomes an inherent part of an organization. So for Luminous, DEI is a core. It's a part of culture, it is a part of org capability, it is a part of recruitment and retention, and it's a part of empowerment and engagement. I'll give you a recent example. I visited Gagret. Now we are a regulatory industry. in a lead acid battery, we can't have women. There was a participant who asked me that, Ruby, are you trying to say that 15 years back, we were not growing and there was no innovation in productivity because we never had women? The point is not that. This question just stayed with me is because every organization has a different journey and you can't push it with numbers, right? I always say this, that diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice. What we need to do is build inclusion in an organization. To coming back to your question, broken rung is very close to my heart. We all talk about glass ceiling, but I feel glass ceiling, the beginning of glass ceiling is broken rung. So as per the McKinsey report, every 100 managers that become a first-time manager, only 87 women make it to the first-time manager. And women who don't make it to the first-time manager, their self-esteem, their self-efficacy, their confidence goes down the drain. And therefore, I take a lot of pride that we started this program for women, which was Catalyst, an internally curated program of 21 women, out of which 14 of them took their first-time manager promotion. And therefore, the message should be that while we are doing this positive affirmations, we are not compromising on meritocracy. Yeah? And we very strongly represent gender and generation. And I say that, Sonica, that we talk a lot about Gen Z and Gen Y, but we should not forget Gen X in the organization.
Yeah.
It is inclusion, right? And I have a 7-year-old son who for the longest time never addressed me Ma. He called me, hi, what's up, Ruby Khan? And I was okay with that because I understand he's coming from an alpha generation now. But the point is, and I'm curating an internal program on multi-force or multi-generational workforce. The question is, we are always focusing on Gen Z is like this, millennial is like this. We need to know why, right? I mean, imagine, how many of you have kids? And say if they don't make it to the competition in top 3, what will be your response to them? Try harder. You made an effort. Yeah, at least you tried. And that's exactly, there's a philosophy, there's a concept of effort versus outcome. We encourage kids to participate, make an effort, and they come back to the corporate world where say, effort, theek hai, dhanda kahan hai? Right? So I think it's also important to understand the mental models of what the representation of an organization is. So coming back to the point. So I think for us, what worked is a very strong, deep mental model frameworks, understanding, sensitization, and also promoting difficult conversation. Not shutting up people and saying, listen, this is a DEI mandate and you have to do it. No, right. We promote a difficult conversation. There are people who ask me, will you be able to take this session in Afghanistan? Trust me, they ask me this. And I promote that difficult conversation because that's very important. That's the starting point for me. Yeah. Thank you.
So, Leenika, right? Are you seeing, I'm sure when you, with Nasscom, you must be hearing from many, many organizations. And you win some, you lose some. What happens when some of the DEI initiatives and efforts do not get the results that they are driving for? Are they able to get up again and go for it? Do they give up? How do they bring that resilience in the organization or in themselves as DEI professionals?
So, Sonica, I'll flip this a little. So, with quick introductions, my name is Leenika. I lead the DNI charter for Nasscom, which is an industry association. See, DNI, like she mentioned, Walmart has taken over their DNI practices. So, DNI is not about is it being successful, is it not being successful, is it a practice, etc., right? So, for me, diversity today exists in everything that we do. Like, for example, in the IT industry, even the workspaces are diverse, right? There are people who are working from home, there are people working from office. So the diversity is to that extent. we keep talking about people with disability. There are certain disabilities which are visible. There are certain disabilities which are not visible. So I think diversity is a fact. It's a given that, we are all diverse. Now, what is very important is the other chart, which is inclusion, belonging, equity, and so on, right? So that has to be ingrained into every organization, and a lot of organizations today are shifting towards that. Now, as an industry association, what is our role, right? What are we trying to do? So for us, diversity is two pillars. One is about gender. And for us, it's women in tech largely when it comes to gender. The other is beyond gender. And it could be anything. It could be persons with disability. It could be LGBTQIA+. It could be neurodiversity. And I said it could be without anything, right? Anybody could need a reasonable accommodation. So it is about that kind of diversity. So three models for us, we very clearly see there is an intent. And the intent is there both in the tech sector and in the non-tech sector. The intent sometimes is driven by the headquarters because of the multinational organizations, etc. But I see a lot of individuals interested today because they see merit in it. Like I speak to a lot of male allies, and they feel merit in promoting women employees. They are not promoting women employees because it's a diversity. They feel they are more loyal, they are more productive, they are more hardworking, and so on. So there are merits in promoting diversity today. But the question that people generally struggle with, how do we do? Where do we begin with? Where do we go? And this is a question for everybody. Anybody who's starting a neurodiversity journey or people with disability, how do we hire? Where do we hire? What do we do? And so on, right? So as an industry association, three-pronged approach for us for both gender and beyond gender, which is engage, advocate, and celebrate. Engage would be models where we want to kind of communicate with people internally, externally, events, roundtables, and so on. Advocacy for us is building content, right? So it is very important, like I'm just finishing a report on neurodiversity, where we've featured about 15 organizations who've taken this journey and certain ecosystem partners who are supporting this, right? It's a white paper completely focused on neurodiversity, clearly defines what are the different neurodiverse spectrums. People don't even understand that, right? It's just a word, neurodiversity. So for us, advocacy is very important. To create the right kind of content is very, very important, and we're building that content. The content is available on our, it's a public information, it's on Nasscom Community Diversity and Inclusion. You'll see a lot of content that we are hosting. And it's cloud-sourced content. Any one of you can write on that page, and we would want to amplify that. There is also that ecosystem partners concept where we encourage people to work with Nasscom, and you become our ecosystem partner, you host content, work with us on the agenda. So it's a completely inclusive agenda. So we are not wanting to drive something on our own, right? The third part for us is celebrate, which is do awards, get inspirational stories be awarded. And the same engage, advocate, celebrate agenda holds true for the women in tech also, right? For example, we recently concluded awards where we said organizations that are propelling women in tech, individuals who are doing innovations, and leaders like male allies or individuals propelling women in tech, and then get to not only just do awards, then get to creating a compendium, creating an index. There are much deeper topics which need attention. The government is also focusing, right? So the government is also saying, you need to report your gender pay parity, BRSR, etc. There is a she-box portal that's coming out where they are saying any posh grievance needs to get in. I mean, you have an option. Either you go to your organization or you get into the portal. So there's a lot that's happening. I don't think we just need to get carried away by the word DEI. We all know what it means. We all know how important it is. and let's do the journey together. Sorry for being a little lengthier.
No, but I think that was bang on because it's the intent. I think that's the key message I am getting across all the panelists. So this is my last question, and I would request inputs from everyone, because here we have participants or delegates from different stages. Their organizations would be in different stages. We are almost at the end of 2024. We will start a new year shortly. Their budgeting cycles might be different, but very soon they will be making their plans. So if an organization is just starting on their DEI journey, or if it's on their way but need to strengthen it, or they're mature but the DEI goals are constantly evolving, what would be the top 3 things that you would tell them to focus on for the coming year? So we could start with you, Bhavna, and then...
Sure. I think the first thing to focus on is journey is different for different people. Don't assume everybody gets it. Set expectations and then equip people. Equip managers, equip teams, equip colleagues with what it is that we want to live, right? Make it explicit. So that's one. Educate so that there is a level playing field, level understanding. 2, celebrate stories. But please don't convert this agenda into a bunch of metrics that need to get reported. It is about much more than that. It is about the ethos that we live every day. I'm particularly proud of the organization that I work with. We've just undergone a CEO change. After a fantastic innings, Doug Peterson has handed over to Martina Chung, who's taken over. In the history of the company of 160 plus years, first woman, first Asian, first openly LGBTQ AI community member, right? But that's not her identity. She is a business leader who's proven herself in every field. Let's make respect for human beings primary when we look at inclusion and when we look at belonging, because that's what it's about. It's about respect for every human being, irrespective of the uniquenesses that we bring. Those would be my top 3.
Super. Ruby?
We as an organization are transitioning. We are moving from a inverter battery to a holistic energy solution provider, where our niche skills and the way we are operating, we need diverse workforce, of course, because we are on the journey of innovation. So what I have realized over a period of time, 3 things that work is: 1, why do you need DEI in your context? Don't do it because everybody else is doing it. Let's be practical and let's be sustainable. An organization has to be a representation of society and customers. If you want to serve your customers, you need to have the right mix of people who can serve your customers. So that's 1. And therefore, identify practically where are you on the journey. If you are starting, very important, please look at sensitization, awareness, mental models of your people, and also keep the bedrock inclusion and equity. The moment you get into numbers, it'll fail flat and you will get into a diversity fatigue. Don't do that, right? So it's a sustainable journey. Go slow, take time, but be very practical and realistic where you want to be. 2 inputs: sensitization, awareness, leaders as sponsors, business as sponsors. Sonica, I'll be very happy if I am not called as a DEI practitioner and a CXO or CEO is called for a talk, right? So business owning DEI agenda, managers owning DEI agenda, and with a very strong sponsorship. And 3rd, if this gets stable, after that, get an employee resource group. It's very, very helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
Karishma.
Context, I think for me the top 3 priorities is first of all to understand where am I, what is my P0, to understand where am I in my journey of maturity. I mean, whether you follow a 3-level matrix, 4-level matrix, or 5-level matrix of maturity, you need to know where you are. Are you just a beginner? Are you in the transitioning phase? Are you in a compliance phase? Are you maturing to become an industry leader? That will define where you are and what's going to be your journey, number one. Once you've said that, second for me is going to be how do I integrate my DI charter, which is a representation of the mission and vision of the organization. I can't function in silos, and I can't simply say, okay, this is what I believe I would be doing, and I align my DI team to do that without having a business partnership. And that will happen when I am completely aligned with business. My business owners are adopting all of that because they see merit in it. It becomes a business case, and eventually that becomes more sustainable over long term. So once I have that, what is going to be the next course of action? I was recently having a conversation with one of the largest conglomerates of India, and they are about 13 different representations of different companies from different industries under that specific conglomerate. And they asked me, Karishma, we have 6 months, can you design a DI plan for us, which we want to, because everybody is doing DI, we also want to do DI. Now my first question was, if everybody is doing, what is your why behind it? Why do you want to do? Everybody is doing may not be your right why also, right? So once you have that, then you need to have a charter which is aligned with mission and vision of the organization so that everybody has one language, one call. But the moment that you dive deep into different industries within that conglomerate, or even if you are just holding one company, within that company, different lines of business, what is it in store for me? As an R&D person, as a marketing person, as a salesperson, as a driver implementation person, as a person who is managing the HR resources, as a person who's managing ARGs for that matter, what is in store for me? Why should I be into it? What is that I'm trying to work out? What is my why behind it? And once you have that, I think then it is all about how do you embed that into your systems and processes so that eventually it becomes a part of your culture, more sustainable in long term, giving you long term results, rather than just saying, okay, DEI was implemented about a particular plan, did not work out, let's try B plan. Unless that is linked to a strategy which is more owned and driven by business, everything else will be short-lived, and eventually you'll be questioned for the work that you've done not yielding results. Those are my 3 cents.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what I'll share is that what we are doing in our organization. So we have taken the reference of this very potent study which has come out, the Aron study, the Voice of Women Workforce, the Voice of Women Study 2024, which has captured, based on a survey of 24,000 plus women, which also included women managers, women of different generation, and of LGBTI community also. So in this, there are 2, I think, most insightful things that we have picked up. One is that, visibility of women leaders matter because, people see them and believe that the organization is not discriminating. It also creates trust and it creates confidence. So we are working on development of women leaders. Second insight that we have drawn from the study is that managers define a woman's workplace. And so we are working on workplace experience. And so we are working a lot around sensitizing managers, making them responsible, making them as a DEI managers and not, having a separate section of DEI team. Third thing that we are working on is a feedback loop. We had this case of our chairperson who came and she did a connect session, and one of the woman employees said that there is no toilet facility in her shop floor because she has to walk down to another shop floor. And then, everybody said, why can't she walk down? Why did she go and tell this to the chairperson? Is this a topic to be shared with the chairperson? While the learning here is that we don't have a feedback loop in the organization, and we need to create connect forums, as simple as that. And we have started working on that, having various connect forums so that we can capture these voices and then work on them and continuously enhance the workplace experience. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So for me, I'm leading multiple entities, and every entity is in a very different journey on its growth. So my recommendation would be to first understand why DI, what it would entail as a business need, how it's going to come in. And second, I think because, Ruby mentioned about metrics, I would say I would also recommend don't get into metrics, but let data be an enabler for you to understand what are the needs. So I feel that metrics are very important, but let not metrics be the way that will drive your DI agenda. For example, and I'll explain you what I'm saying. So one of our numbers, we continuously do NPS, and of course, you know, our NPS through numbers where you know, we realized that our women segment NPS scores were low, and that's where we went a little deep dive to understand that why their scores are low, you know, and we, you know, as a company we felt that, you know, we've never differentiated. We went deeper, we saw that our pay for parity in fact was higher than for women than to men. So what's the issue? We went deeper to understand, heard from them. And that's the time when we actually said that, hey, this is the need for the organization. So so your DNI programs would be successful only when you understand what's the customer's need, what is in them for them, why do organizations would need them. And that's where I think we are launching Wings. That's a network group. That came from our women folks, because our women are very, very young, come from a multi-generational workforce, women in tech. We have a large tech team. So we realized that's the need of the hour. Similarly, I spoke about our gig workers. So I think for every entity, every company, I think the needs are going to be very different. Don't just get into this one article that talks about, hey, we picked up 50 people from the campus, and that's maybe your company doesn't need that, or maybe your company needs that. So I feel that all of us who are sitting here or on the table, I think it's about that particular need as to why we need DI, and how that DI could actually be very, very amalgamated into your culture. We have a set of values. We've launched I Care, where respect is a very core value. Yeah, and what does respect mean? You know, respect means you know, respect for diverse opinions, respect for diverse generations. So I think that's how you kind of seamlessly have diversity in the agenda. You know, not just by saying that, you know, tomorrow, and trust on me, it's 21 years of experience. We've made mistakes when we were younger. Hey, we want to launch DII because it looks very fancy, and we had no strategic objectives and it failed. So this is my piece of recommendation, and let it be seamlessly flow in the business strategy. And it's very important for you or us to inculcate or articulate why it is important for us. Thank you.
So three things. See, from an industry perspective, while I agree with everybody that first thing first, we should know where do we stand as our own company, right? So people call this diversity dashboard, where basically you have something. But I also feel what gets measured gets done. So there is that importance of certain numbers. Sensitization is obviously important. So what we've done as Nasscom, we've created an assessment framework. It's a very simple framework, and it is around 3 aspects of diversity: gender, PWD, and LGBTQIA+ for now. And it has very simple questions. Like, as an organization, it simply asks you to say, do you have a DNI policy? Do you have budgets? Who is managing DNI in your organization? And so on and so forth, right? So it assesses and gives you score to say, where do you stand on the overall focus on DNI? Where do you stand on gender? Where do you stand, etc., etc. So that's from an industry standpoint. But I also remember a very good case study. This was, I think, Capgemini. A very senior business leader was asked this question to say, how are you, what makes you do diversity so well? Basically have a right mix in your teams. And this is about a sales team, right? And she said that I take the buy-in of my customers. See, we are all hearing from the DNI professionals, right? So this is our side of it. But what is very important is to have these sponsors and understand their viewpoint. And she said, now the situation is such that my customers, when I'm proposing, they ask, what is the mix in your team? So she's been able to rationalize the benefits of a diverse team. And that's how internally the agenda works very well. So, those are some of the thoughts.
Super.
Okay, so you have many of the points to select your top 3 priorities and to decide from. So I'll not go in 1, 2, 3, but I would like to actually start that for any of this to happen, what is very, very important is belongingness. And that cannot happen in your boardrooms, that cannot happen in your meeting rooms, that cannot happen within your organizations just. What is very, very important is that all of these people that we are wanting to work with, in some or other way, they are all part of your ecosystem already. So when you are to prioritize, don't look at that there is this outside community that you have to cater to now. Look at the people who are already part of maybe a disability or maybe a part of the LGBTQ spectrum or maybe are women and are looking for somebody to guide and mentor them to take it to the next level. How do you identify and create that belongingness and create that ecosystem wherein everybody could find you as an accessible mentor or a guide to take you onto that journey? And that's very, very important. What is also very, very important is that don't have that fatigue in you that, oh, you are the savior. Because in many of our DEI initiatives, it is somehow emerging as a new CSR gambit, which it is not. It is very, very important that people in the outside world need to find that there is this DEI which is part of the DNA of the organization. If I am really inclusive, my security person cannot be having a suspicious eye on a trans person or cannot really be very rigid on somebody with disability walking in a wheelchair to ask them, what are you doing in a 5-star hotel? That compassion, that empathy, and that sort of a consciousness will only happen when there are conversations, when there are people who people can find themselves in. And that can only happen when you will have opportunities open for your team members to create that belongingness with. In many of our conversations, I always reiterate the fact that there is this quote that Mariwala Health Initiative had come up with, that I see you, but to see you, I must situate myself. And this is where you all have mentioned that CXOs, CEOs, executive directors of our organization need to sponsor DEI. That will only happen when all of them will actually not look at DEI as matrices or datas and not look as all of us to understand what exactly it is. All of them should be part of that larger framework of communities that all of us are wanting to involve. And I am very proud to come from a place wherein my CMD, my executive directors are part of all these events and gatherings. My CEO is at the event before me every time I talk about something. I come from an organization which has more than 50% of representation in board of women, including trans women sitting in the corporate leadership. I come from a place wherein persons with disabilities are not just part of the baseline jobs, but are assistant managers, are managers, are including general managers and advisors to the company. I come from an organization wherein I, being 28 in total age, so I may not be even in years of experience, not that huge, but have been invested by an organization in a way that I create that enabling environment along with the larger team. And that is why I continuously mention that every time people see me on stages or dioceses, it's not me, but the larger commitment of 3,500 people that all of us work with to come to places like this. Because had it been not them enablers in our organization, all of that I say now and all these stories that I bring with me would have not found their relevance. And I think that is what we need to be as an individual first. We need to pick up at least one person in and around and tell them that I am there as your mentor and guide. Don't think that everybody eventually will change in your organization, but pick that one story, work on that and tell that if I can do it, you can do it too. And all of us collectively will drive those stories. And I'm very proud that Arushi is sitting in the first row today here. She is from the same college, and I give it to my alma mater, Jamia Millia Islamia, because that place has really shown me what truly diversity is. And this is where I am very, very happy and proud that when all of us are sitting together here, I am the token man representative of diversity, because all of these powerful women are not here because they are women, but because of the amazing work that they are doing in their individual capacities. And this is the power of diversity that we need to look at.
And that is passion. So if I were to summarize what I've heard everybody say, okay? answer your why do we need it, follow it up with data and diagnostics, support it with data and diagnostics, listen to your people, every organization will be different, so choose your top 3 or 4, integrate it in your DEI charter in your vision or strategy, equip others, managers, people, everyone, so that we are you are not the only one driving it. Sustainably drive it through business accountability, developing the very people that you are working for, ERGs, systems, policies, and processes, and have the passion that we just heard in the end. Right? So with that, we come to the end of what we had to say, but if there are any questions, and please give us 2-3 minutes for questions. Any questions to any of the panelists? Okay, we have 2 questions. Okay. Who are your questions for? If you could. Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much. I'll be very precise. Most of you spoke about why, but as a practitioner, I want to know when you presented this agenda to your CEO, what they answered you in terms of why, right? Like, why, I want to know what they said, that why they wanted to drive, and hence you came into picture and you designed the agenda and curated it. Second concern as a practitioner which we face is the talent pool. I understand hospital industry, they have access to pool, but if you are running an operation in an IT where I require a talent knowing the niche technology, even if I have an intent and mindset, I cannot bring diverse talent because the talent pool has an issue. So I think none of you spoke about it, so if you could touch upon from your industry that what some of the best practices you had. And this question is open, any one of you can answer. Thank you.
I'm going to take the second one first. Talent pools never have issues. We hire for intent and we train for competence. So if we feel that the talent pool doesn't exist, maybe we can do something about it. There was a time I used to work with Genpact a few years ago. And the reason I've said the name of the company was because an urban legend that I heard was that Genpact was one of the few that actually gave birth to the industry, right? And there's an urban legend which says that at one time there was a board outside the Phase 5 office that said trespassers will be recruited. Yeah, it's our mindset. If we believe there's a problem with the talent, maybe there's a problem with what we are doing and what we're thinking of, worth us considering how we invest in talent. Farm to table is not just a concept that gets discussed on MasterChef. It's what we have to make happen as organizations. We are accountable for building talent as well. That's number 2. On your first one, I will tell you, it was our CEO who asked us, how do we make this happen? And it is about flipping the narrative because, you know, as we've all tried to share, it is not the accountability. Let's not assume for a moment that DEI teams are the karta dhartas of all thing DEI. It is the organization and the CEOs and the ecosystem, and by the way, leaders at every single level. What I will say, however, is that when intent is strong, it is our role to hold up the mirror and say, this is where we are, this is the journey, these are the phases that we need to do, this is the investment, let's make it happen. So that's my very quick response to you.
One more question we'll take, and the rest we can do over coffee.
Hi, I'm Afreen, a very interesting panel, and I'm so glad that when we are talking about DEI, we talked about leadership accountability. I think Rubi and Karishma touched on that, but maybe you could elaborate on that, because when we talk about, you know, the different pillars, D, E, and I, and then belonging, there's a gap between inclusion and belonging, and I feel that that's partly because we say that there's leadership, there should be leadership accountability, but let's talk, on the real facts and how does, that's not really there in organizations yet. And, how could we practically make leadership accountability happen? Or do you have some examples in your organizations where you have held, people accountable for their behaviors?
I'll share example of my last organization I was working with, and initially I was in corporate HR taking care of all people, processes, things, everything in between, and all the RFPs that used to come, and I'm talking about an IT organization, all the RFPs that used to come, I used to be responding to all those RFPs. And 2015 onwards, I had seen a surge of my requests. Do you have a DI policy? Do you have a DI budget? What is the kind of mix that you have in your organization?
Correct.
And I kept going back to my CHRO at that point in time, that what do I answer about this when I know it is part of the culture, but I do not really have a separate portfolio to show, hey, this is what I'm doing in my DI. That got flipped the moment in one of the meetings my CEO walked into US and he had to meet the customers. All of the side of the customers were an excellent blend of diversity. And all he saw from his organization were all men in black, suited, booted, all same with the tag of the organization. That day, he went back to the same CHRO talking about, why are we not investing into diversity? Now that's the flip. Despite the fact that there's a need from the customer, till the time the mindset is being shifted, till the time the perception has been broken, till the time you're questioning your own stereotypes, you will not make that shift. That's the first thing. Second, to your question, how do you make leaders accountable? One, of course, the moment that you start embedding that into your charter, and that charter reflects each line of business. One is overall charter you will have to create. But to link to that charter, when you're looking at each line of business, what does it means from a sales team? What does it mean from a marketing team? What does it mean for my for example, if it is an IT company, my software development, my UI team, my global development team, my L&D team, my recruitment team, all the teams, and it has to go to that level. The accountability then has to be shifted, because then each of the leader has to own that through your goals assessment system. Each of the person who is driving at the grassroots level has to be able to see how his work is getting accountable and measured at that level. Even one contribution, one diversity hiring can make a lot of impact, because it's just not one diversity hiring that you are doing. You are also shifting the mindset and culture of each person who is going to be coming in touch with that particular person. So it is just not about creating a matrix, but how do you embed that matrix into your daily habits, into your daily interaction, into your daily conversation. That is when the actual change will start to happen. And please don't mind me saying this, keep going back to the matrices. Why? Because as everyone says, what you actually try to trace gets either a progress or a deterioration. When it is a deterioration, you need a correction. When it is a progress, you need to make more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, I think we have outstayed our welcome. So with that, we will wrap up this panel discussion. Ruby will take this question again during the coffee break. And there was another person who had raised their arm. Please feel free to approach the panelists during the coffee break. And thank you so much. You've been a very patient and great audience. And panelists, you were awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for an interactive panel discussion. And to do the felicitation, I would request Ms. Sonica Aron to please be back on the stage.